Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. Welcome to Local Authors with Kameel Nasr. I am Kameel Nasr, and I have a really wonderful pleasure to have a great writer here, Connie Johnson Hambley. Welcome, Connie.
I know. Thank you, Kameel. This is so much fun for me.
Yeah. So I've read your books. I love your writing.
Thank you.
Tell us a little about your background. I know you have a law degree, right?
Yes, yes. I don't like to confess to that early in the game, Kameel, because a lot of folks think, oh, lawyers, must be a very tedious book, or, maybe that won't capture my interest. But I have to say that, people ask, where did you learn how to write? And law school, for me, was the best place to learn because it really taught me to write to the reader's viewpoint, not to have the story in my head, but to make sure that the story I have in my head gets into my reader's head. And law school was a great way to do that because, to me, a really good reader is like a very tenacious adversary across the way, opposing counsel. It was a good training ground for me.
Now, we talked a little bit about your background. You had something that really happened in your... Tell us, okay?
Well, a lot of folks think, gee, you went from law to writing fiction. Where do you get the ideas for your books? And I grew up on a dairy farm in New York State. And when I was a child, an arsonist targeted our family and burned our farm down. Intentionally lit a match, threw it in the hayloft, waited until milking time when all the cows were 200 head were in the barn.
Oh wow!
And targeted us as a family
because
it was a disgruntled employee. So bad things happen to good people, but there was a lot of errors in that story, and the gentleman was never convicted, even though he confessed, because the Miranda rights were error, and he had technical errors.
I see.
That's right.
I see. Oh, and so you went to law to correct.
That's right. So there are a couple of themes there. That's so true.
Well, how did that affect your writing?
It did. Well, what it really did at first was show me that bad things can happen to good people, and that this man who did this horrible thing never paid for his crime, and he was a beloved father and husband. So to a young child's mind, that was a lot to understand.
Right.
And there's a theme that runs through my books where you're really not quite sure, is this a good person or a bad person?
Right.
And it's the prism on that shifts according to the circumstances they're in.
There's one character that I went back and forth. Is this a good guy or is this a bad guy? Right.
Excellent. That's what I want you to do.
We're talking with Connie Johnson Hambley, and so we're talking about our books. This is her latest book, The Troubles, and she has another book called The Charity. They're a sequel of the two, and let's get right into it. The books are about Ireland.
Yes.
They're about horses. They're about the IRA. They're about a character who discovers that the person she thought was her mother was not really her mother. And then later on, I don't want to give the story away, but tell me, hit me if I've given the story away. Later on, we discovered that she has questions about her father. Let's say it that way. All right, so tell us about this character. Very interesting.
Well, I initially conceived of Jessica Wyeth, who's the main character, as a woman, everyday woman, who uncovers the money and the business behind a terrorist cell. The terrorist cell that I use is a Boston-based cell of the IRA, and the business and the money happens to be high-end horse training, thoroughbred racing, and then in book 3 it'll be Olympic equestrian events. And I chose that because, a main character needs something that raises them above the average person. So her skill with horses is that thing.
Yes.
But these are not, horse books in the traditional sense. So when the act of terrorism, too, revolves around the character in a way that I like to say that if an act of terrorism is a pebble thrown into the middle of a pond, my story takes place in the outer ripples of that act.
Yes.
So you're not getting, graphic details about the planning and what happens in the terrorist act, but you're getting to know the whys and the whos of terrorism in a way. And I use Ireland and a lot of the Irish history because my family is Irish.
Yes.
And I grew up hearing stories about horrible poverty. And then I also grew up hearing stories about freedom fighters.
Right.
And depending
Well, you're
upon...
Irish, you would just hear stories.
That's right.
More and more stories are noted for the stories.
Well, you know as well as I do that a writer's brain is like a junk drawer. So you hear all this stuff and you have it all rattling around.
Yeah, and you have a little notebook. Do you carry a notebook?
I don't carry a notebook.
Okay, so one of the things that really struck me was just on page 1 of this book, The Troubles. Connie, there's a bomb that's set off. Mm-hmm. And what happens in Manchester, England, this is part of the Troubles, what's euphemistically called the Troubles. And what happens is the person who puts the bomb immediately calls, what does he call Scotland Yard or the police, I forgot. He calls and gives them certain words that they know, so they know that this is not a false alert, in order to clear the area. And I thought, God, how much different it is today. We seem to have degenerated or something like that. What did they want to do?
The purpose of terrorism is to make a point and to bring a population of people to the point of fear to change their behaviors. That's really what the point of terrorism is. And we see that in the Troubles with the IRA, they were and considered themselves good people. They weren't terrorists, they were freedom fighters. So what they did was when they planted a bomb in the middle of a shopping mall, the day before Father's Day, they didn't just leave it there and run. They called news outlets and police outlets to say, there's a bomb, clear the area. And what they wanted to do was affect change through fear. We're here, we're not going away. They wanted to be disruptive, but they didn't want to kill.
Yeah.
But
they did. I'm sorry. They did. They did. They didn't want to kill innocent people. They killed. Exactly. So they aimed for Margaret Thatcher. You talk about this in your book.
Yes.
You don't talk about Lord Mountbatten.
I tried to bring that.
And those. I remember this very clearly. The 3 IRA people that were gunned down, and so there's in Gibraltar. So there's a lot of facts in here that you kind of intermingle.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up because to me, the best fiction hangs on the bones of fact. And the more realism I can put into my books where readers like yourself are like, oh wow, that really did happen. How does this go about? That to me, the more realism I can read into my book, the better that book reading experience is going to be for you. Now, so in the first book, The Charity, as I said, Boston-based IRA,
yes.
I've had readers convinced that I am writing about Whitey Bulger, the Winter Hill Gang, yes. and the Clover Club. They're convinced that I'm writing about that. So here it is, all fiction.
Yeah, but it's not exactly a charity.
But it's not exactly a charity, nor was the Clover Club and the Winter Hill Gang. But
Yeah.
And then in the when I was researching the second book to try to find that cubbyhole of history, I could then place my story. I based it on a real bombing that even though the IRA claimed responsibility for it, no one was ever prosecuted for it. So my author's note is, hey, on June 15th, 1996, this happened.
Yeah.
But here's my reason why no one was ever prosecuted for it.
Right.
And again, that harkens back to arson prosecution when I was younger. No one was prosecuted. So how does that work?
Right.
So to me, those are compelling questions. And as I had mentioned to you earlier, that if you close the cover of a book and you set it aside and you never think about that book again, that's not what I want for my readers. I want people to close the cover of that book and go, wow, let me think about that. How did that happen? I want it to stay with you somehow.
So this book's also about horses, right?
Yes.
You must know a lot about horses.
I do.
And you talk about the doping of horses somewhere here, and this was part of the money-making angle of it. And there's this wonderful scene, what you call a steeplechase. I never knew what a steeplechase was until you told me what it was. And there's this wonderful scene of the race, and these jockeys hitting each other, and it was like, did you get this from Ben-Hur? Is that what? Because it was like that Ben-Hur kind of moment.
The steeplechase is like a roller derby on horseback. I mean, initially it was a cross-country race that went from one church to another, over hill and dale.
One steeple to another, because you can see the steeple.
Exactly right. Yeah. And any way you could get there, you go. And then in England, they don't have flat races like we do here. They have what they call jump races or steeplechases, and the terms are interchangeable. And they are known, steeplechase jockeys and racers are known to be incredibly cutthroat.
Yes. You get that in the book. Okay.
Yeah.
We're talking with Connie Johnson Hambley. We're talking about her two books, The Troubles and The Charity. I really liked reading the book. It was very informative, very fast, and the characters were really deep. So these horse, where does the main character, she wins, or second place, but wins, right? She wins because the main horse was doped.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Have you ever done that? Have you ever?
I've never, I've done.
Have you ever jumped over?
I've jumped, yes.
Yeah?
I've done hunter paces, which are a very genteel cross-country over-fence event.
Yeah.
And I've done show jumping, which is in a ring where you jump. And I've also done dressage, which is the equivalent of ballet on horseback. Making the horse do side passes.
I've seen that in the Olympics.
Yes, exactly.
That's
exactly.
Right.
So I've done all of those things, not at the caliber and level of my main character, but then that makes it fun for me to write.
Right, And people get hurt in this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't remember. Did you keep count of how many people you knocked over?
No. But actually the research was really fun because, again, I really do like to get my facts absolutely right. So I watched a lot of steeplechase races on YouTube and at Aintree, the National Hunt. And when you look at that and you see these horses launch themselves over fences that are taller than you.
Amazing,
And they're crashing, and they catch a fence mid-chest and they topple over. And the last thing that jockey sees is a 1-ton animal coming down on them, or almost a half-ton animal. And it's it's thrilling, and so I wanted to capture that as well.
I didn't know you were kind of a blood sport kind of. You seem like a nice person.
You probably know that when you write mysteries and thrillers, and people read your books, they kind of look at you funny. Because they're like, what are you thinking?
So let's get back to the main character. Did you have any personal experience with identity?
Just with having that, seeing someone, you think that when you see someone that you can tell if they're a good person or a bad person. Their identity somehow is telegraphed through their energy or through their manner. So my experience with identity is what I described earlier, which is here's this, person who looks like a regular guy, but yet he was able to target and do something heinous. So to me, that's the identity piece. And then also with my main character, in the first book, she was falsely accused of murder and had to go into hiding. So she had to assume a different identity.
Yeah.
But what was interesting about that, you can change your name, but the essence of who you are stays inside.
Yes.
So it was her acumen with horses that then brought her, that kind of blew the cover, so to speak, that people could say, who is this person who could ride like that?
And she, like so many other Irish people, go to find their roots,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And I think somebody mentions that in the book. I can't remember who. They say, "Oh, lots of Americans come here to find their roots."
Yes.
Did you do that too?
Actually, I did. I have one more document left before I can become an Irish citizen. Because I can be by virtue.
Then you'll be part of the EU.
Then I would be part of the EU.
Yeah.
But I did go to. I took my family to Ireland years ago, and went to my grandmother's home, her birthplace, my great grandparents' grave, and we met family over there, and they treated us like rock stars, like we were coming home again. And that feeling of coming home and being at the place where your ancestors walked, that was something I really wanted to put in my main character, because she had been uprooted from her home because of the murder allegation, and she's been kind of this ship without a rudder. But yet, when she gets her feet on Irish soil, she can almost feel, the roots, start from the soles of her feet and go down into the bedrock. She just feels that's a part of her, and I felt that too when I was there. That there is a different energy, a different dimension that you sense when you know you're walking in your ancestors' footsteps, and I'm thrilled you picked up on that, because that was something I wanted my readers to experience.
Yeah. So and then so they're in Ireland, and she gets she becomes part of the Troubles, unwittingly, and she's not really liked. In fact, she's some people try to kill her, right?
Oh yeah. Well,
how come? What's the thing?
First off, if her life went smoothly, I wouldn't have a really exciting book. So I have to have a lot of conflict going on. Yeah. But she, in the first book, she is Jessica Wyeth, daughter of Margaret and Jim Wyeth of Hamilton, Massachusetts. That's who she is. And then as she goes through solving this murder and finding out what happened to her family and why, she finds one document, and it's her birth certificate, and it shows that, it was actually the aunt, her age aunt, that raised her, but it was her mother, and that rocked her, because the question that compelled her is, how could my biological mother live with me for 10 years and never say the words, I'm your mother? And as an author, that was a question that rattled around. What would be so compelling that a woman would be with her daughter every day for 10 years and never say those words?
Yeah.
And so then as I was constructing the narrative for the Troubles and was getting much more into the history, the conflict and reunification struggles, I realized that if I created a very modern woman that was placed in 1950s, 1960s Ireland, which is not known for, being modernistic in its approach to women. So if I created a modern woman who was in fact part of the reunification efforts for Northern Ireland and Ireland, then what would that look like? And then wouldn't that be part of the secret that she would have to keep to herself. She would be viewed as a terrorist, perhaps.
So it wasn't just men who were part of the freedom campaign or the terrorist campaign, whichever side you're on.
Right. Absolutely. In fact, some of the research I did, I read Jerry Adams' biographies, and he's prolific. He's written about 6 of them. And he's had some amazing passages of women in Belfast who had baby carriages, and they would put ammunition and grenades and all sorts of things at the bottom of the baby carriages.
Exactly. That's what happens, right?
Right. And I absolutely, that was the spark of an idea for one of the scenes I had. But the women were very essential to the fight with that. But it took a certain kind of woman to do that, because if a woman was tied down with husband and family, she probably wouldn't be at the forefront of the risk-taking. But my main character, Bridget, Jessica's mother, she wasn't tied down by children and family. So she was able to use that, in a sense, that intellect, that time that she had in order to effect some of the changes that she wanted.
Okay, we're talking with Connie Johnson Hambley, and great author. The other part is the church. The church was very essential. Where did the church stand officially on the Troubles, the conflict between Ireland and Britain?
Well, officially, the Catholic Church would be a neutral stance, but within the Troubles, you did have tensions between Protestants and Catholics, as you did have against Irishmen who thought they were either nationalists or loyalists. So the Church actually played a very complicated role. And again, Jerry Adams talks about Jerry Adams is the head of Sinn Féin, which is the political wing of the Northern Ireland Troubles. And IRA, if you want to say, Sinn Féin is the brain and the IRA is the brawn, but officially they never spoke. So Jerry Adams is saying, I'm never speaking to any terrorist over here with the IRA, so how do they magically coordinate and know what the other is doing? Well, Jerry Adams said that there was an Irish Catholic priest that he referred to as the Sagart. And the Irish Catholic priest was the go-between for that. So that was the spark to one of the characters I have as the bishop. So we have all this conflict going on here, and then your character goes through this minefield, and in fact somebody shoots her at one point. And what happens there? Tell us. Well, that's.
I don't want to give away the story, but if you don't want to say it, but it's not that far into the story, right?
Well, people target people for a lot of reasons. They can target them for revenge. They can target them for to silence them. They can target them in a symbolic gesture. So she was targeted actually on a lot of different fronts for that. And the scene that you're talking about, where during the Steeplechase, that to me was just so much fun. But also I wanted to give my readers again something where they're reading and they're like, oh, and then they go, oh, very different. And yes, there are a lot of people targeted and shot, but then I wouldn't have a thriller. Then I would be writing cozy mysteries if I didn't have that.
It's not really. It's not the. How would you call this a thriller?
Yes.
Right? Yeah. It's not a mystery. There isn't.
No.
There is mystery, but it's something that propels the story forward and so on. And did you how did you learn the writing technique of this? Did you attend classes? Did you go on your own? Have a workshop with people?
Well, the answer would be yes to all of the above. Right. The first book, Charity, is, I consider, more high-octane thriller because I paced the book so that every 25 to 30 pages, there's there's something going on. So that propelled, so Thriller was very action-oriented.
Yeah.
The Troubles and the sequel, which The Wake, it will be more, I consider them more novels of suspense because there are time elements involved. You know what's happening. It's not so much of a mystery, but there's suspense of, how do these storylines weave together? It's not a psychological suspense story like Gone Girl would be, but it would be more suspense, not thriller, because there's more character in it, if that makes sense.
Yes,
it's more character driven.
Yeah, there is a lot of character in it, especially the main character. She's just about it in every scene, isn't she? Or why did you decide third person instead of first person? You could have done this first person, no?
Yeah, I could have, but again, maybe it goes back to my legal training where I am really constructing a story in a very strategic fashion. And if I put you in first person in one character's head, it would kind of shrink up the latitude I would have to unfold other stories. And in Troubles, you have the main character Jessica's timeline, but then also you have you're getting to know her mother's timeline by going back and reading some of her journals.
Oh yes, that's right.
And those timelines are coming up.
Yeah.
And then eventually they do meet, fuse, and then the story continues.
Yes, of course. Yes.
But if I had that in first person, I wouldn't have been able to unfold the story with the same kind of suspense that I wanted.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, I understand it. Because you go back and forth in different time frames and bring up the backstory and so on. Well, as I say, it's a delightful reading. We have. I want to cover this one thing here.
Oh, the stone circle.
The little stone circles. Yeah, we only got half a minute, so give us a real.
Well, you
10 seconds.
You can't go to Ireland without feeling that there's another dimension there. And because I knew that a bishop was going to be a main character, religion was going to be important, and the stone circles that are around Ireland are an important part of not only the fabric of the country, but the fabric of people's hearts.
Well, thank you. That's really great. We're talking with Connie Johnson Hambley. This is their latest book, The Troubles. Okay. Thank you. This is Kameel Nasr, Local Authors.
Thank you so much, Kameel. This is fun.
All right. Thank you.